Life Audio.
The Bible Study Podcast, episode 886. Today, the Bible Study Podcast continues a study of the Intertestamental Period, and especially 1st Maccabees, as we continue on with chapter 1. Welcome to the Bible Study Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We're going to continue on with the story of the Intertestamental Period, having talked about Alexander the Great last week with what happens next. But first, a word from the sponsor. So last week we talked about Alexander the Great. He had captured all of Persia. That's where we kind of left the Old Testament kingdom there of Persia has now gone away, and Alexander conquers, but his empire splits into pieces, and the piece that ends up with Jerusalem is the Seleucid Empire. And that becomes very significant here in 1st Maccabees chapter 1, starting in verse 10. Antiochus Epiphanes and renegade Jews. From them came forth a sinful root. And I always say from them. The from them we're talking about are the Alexander's officers who become kings in 3 or 4 different kingdoms. And specifically, now we're going to deal with one of them. From them came forth a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus, who had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, certain renegades came out from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us, for since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us." This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the nations. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the customs of the nations, and they made foreskins for themselves and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the nations and sold themselves to do evil. So I'm going to pause here. So what's going on here is the Greeks and the Macedonians, and we're going to kind of use them as Greeks from now on. I'm not going to keep saying Macedonians because they are predominantly, we talk about the Hellenistic culture, the Greek culture, comes in, and the people of Israel, now that the Greeks have been ruling here for 137 years, the people of Israel say, it would be better for us to be like our neighbors and not to be so Jewish. It would be better for us to worship the gods of the Greeks, to act as Greeks, and to put aside the law. And now we're around 167 BC, so 167 years before Christ. And in this time period, some of the people are saying, let's stop being Jewish, let's just be Greek like everybody else. And so they had been circumcised, and so they actually make fake foreskins to put on, and I don't even want to, don't draw yourself a picture of that. And they put up a gymnasium because that's the way they do things in Greeks, where they're going to learn. A gymnasium is not just a place where you exercise, but it is a school. And so they're building a school to learn the customs of the nations. And more importantly, then, they're abandoning the Holy Covenant. They're going to stop being Jewish. They joined with the nations and sold themselves to do evil. And then it continues on, Antiochus and Egypt. And remember, I told you we're going to be talking about Egypt and the Seleucid kingdom. Those are the two that we're going to be focusing on. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become the king of the land of Egypt, in order that he might reign over both kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry, and with a large fleet. He engaged King Ptolemy of Egypt in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. They captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. I'm going to skip past that. That is not the most important part of the story, but there's going to be constant warfare in this time period between these various kingdoms as they try and make my kingdom bigger and your kingdom smaller. And so the different kingdoms that came out of Alexander's conquest will be at war with each other throughout this entire book. Persecution of the Jews. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus turned back in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped all of it off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took all the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned. Young women and young men became faint. The beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom took up the lament. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. Now, so Antiochus Epiphanes, who's this king of the Seleucid kingdom, this kingdom of what used to be Persia, but run by Greeks, he comes on his way to fight Egypt. If you look at the difference, right along that road is Israel. And so he comes through Jerusalem on the way back, and while he's there, he plunders the temple, and he takes all of the things that were used for worship. And even though the section before this said that all of these people were deciding not to become Jewish, we see that there are some people here that when the temple is raided, when the temple is plundered, that they go into mourning. That everyone, even those who are the bridegrooms, even those who should be happy, are in a lament. Right? And so what this shows is right away in this book that there are some who want to stay Jewish and there are some who don't. And that's among the Jewish people. The occupation of Jerusalem. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a large, strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful nation, men who were renegades. These strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there and became a great menace. For the citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary they shed innocent blood, and even defied the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate like a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into a reproach, her honor into contempt. Her dishonor now grew as great as her glory. Her exhalation was turned into mourning. This is obviously not just a history book, because that whole section there, that poetic section of for the citadel became an adversary and everyone, all the residents fled, became a dwelling of strangers, became strange to offspring. All of that is more poetic in nature, as one doesn't normally find in a history book, but this is the way one wrote at the time. So what happens then is Jerusalem is now occupied by the Seleucid kingdom. It's now occupied by the Greeks. And they tear down the walls, but they put up these strong walls of a citadel. So they now have this place where those people who don't want to be Jewish anymore, those renegades, right? Those people who want to side with the Greeks and want to become Greeks, they are now controlling the area through this citadel. And this citadel would become an important part of this story, this strong place of presence of power of this outside force inside Jerusalem. And so a lot of people are fleeing Jerusalem. There's a lot of mourning going on. A lot of people are killed. But at this point, the Seleucid kingdom rules what is left of Israel. What is left of Israel is Judah and Jerusalem. So they are in charge. And then the last section here that we'll do today is, what does that have to do to the religion of Israel? Installation of Gentile cults. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that all should give up their particular customs. All the nations accepted the command of the king. Many even from Israel gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messenger to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and festivals, to defile the sanctuary and the holy ones, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they would forget the law and change all the ordinances. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. In such words he wrote to his whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the people and commanded the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice town by town. Many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had. Now on the 15th day of Chislev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege on the altar of burnt offering. They also built altars in the surrounding towns of Judah and offered incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. The books of the law that they found, they tore to pieces and burned with fire. Anyone found possessing the book of the covenant or anyone who adhered to the law was condemned to death by the decree of the king. They kept using violence against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the towns. And on the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar that was on top of the altar of burnt offering. According to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised and their families and those who circumcised them, and they hung the infants from their mothers' necks. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their heart not to eat unclean food. They chose rather to die than to be defiled by food or to profane the holy covenant, and they did die. Very great wrath came upon Israel. And we're going to leave Israel in this terrible, terrible state here where basically their religion has been taken away from them by force by these Greeks who say you have to do things our way, and they have taken the temple and turned it into a Greek temple, and they have decided that anyone who reads the law, anyone who obeys the law will die. And that would be the end of this book if it weren't for the Maccabees, and that's who we'll introduce next week. And with that, we're going to end this episode of the Bible Study Podcast. If you have any questions, send an email to host@thebiblestudypodcast.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at thebiblestudypodcast.com. And thanks so much for listening. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Scott. As a servant of God, wife, and mother of four, I understand the juggle of multiple roles and stages. That's why I created the Encourager podcast to help guide us through the messy middle stage of life. Join me on the Encourager as we challenge the chaos and embrace harmony. Together, we'll create practical systems to balance your roles and fulfill priorities. And we will do it while having joy and energy for both home and work life. Tune in for inspiring stories and interviews, actionable tips, and methods to do both home and work life. Because here, we believe you can do all things, just not all at once.